Hello, hello, hello. Hello, everybody. Here it is, our guest. You see him? Reading. Hello, guys. We're waiting for our guest to get in. Hola, hola, Tita. Hello, Lisa. Hello. Alright, see. Oh, hello. 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 We are waiting. It says waiting for Justin. It says that we are there. I don't know if we can keep going. Justin, why don't I'm gonna cancel and let's see if we can start again. Bum bum bum. And I'm waiting for you here. Why don't you, here it is. Let's see if this one works. Nope. There you are.
Yes, sir.
Perfect. Hey. Welcome here to Creative Conversations at the Dallas Opera Network, TDO Network. Justin Werner, the one and only, thank you for being here with us, my friend.
Good to see you, brother.
Good to see you too. Justin, for if you don't mind, for a few of my friends here, I see a lot of my friends that follow us here in Creative Conversations. I'm going to introduce you a little bit.
Sure.
So, Justin, you're the founder, president, CEO, head honcho of Stratagem Artists. But tell us a little bit, how did you get into this crazy world of the industry of classical music?
Sure. Yeah, I did not grow up with classical music.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't grow up going to the opera or Tanglewood or BUTI like a lot of my colleagues did. And I had a choir teacher in high school who suggested that I look into classical voice.
Mm-hmm.
And at that point, I really didn't think music could be a career. I thought it was a hobby. I sang in church growing up. I sang in a cappella groups and stuff like that. But classical music was really foreign to me, and I actually saw my first opera, which thankfully was Bohème, which was very accessible.
It's a good opera.
Almost 2 semesters into a vocal performance degree, which I would not suggest as a path for everyone. I got lucky and got hooked right away. I think most of all my colleagues are just the best part of the job to have such a common thread and love for our art form. So, I went through undergrad at Boston University as a baritone. Right after undergrad, switched up to tenor. And while I was making that transition, I founded an opera company called the New York Opera Exchange that I ran for 6 years, giving performance opportunities of, top 50 repertoire to emerging artists with orchestra, sets, costumes, and professionals who can help them along in the career. And I never wanted that to be sort of the final resting place for these singers. I wanted them to go on and do these roles at other places. We didn't really make major cuts to the show, so they wouldn't have to go learn another act of a piece if they did it professionally. And while I was doing that, I went back to school for grad school, got a couple lessons in, and then decided, my talents were better used elsewhere. It was the classic tenor moment. I went into a practice room, could not sing that B flat in Jose, and just decided it was time to hang it up. And my teacher and my team, folks like Ken Benson, Bill Pallant, Charlotte Lee have been amazing mentors to me. And I interned at IMG Artists while I was in grad school, which was an incredible opportunity to gain academic credit and learn about a facet of the industry that just isn't really taught. Schools think that young artist programs are going to tell you about management. Young artist programs sort of ask you to figure it out. And I think for a lot of singers, in their 20s and 30s, there's a big gap of how do I get management? Who are they? What do they do for me? So to learn that at a major firm like IMG was incredible. To get to rub elbows with, people like Renee Fleming and Larry Brownlee and folks I really admired. And also, a group of managers, Matthew Horner and the crew, who are representing some of the best talent in the world.
Yeah.
So it was an incredible learning experience for me. I then spent a couple of years being too young to be a real manager, but too qualified for an entry-level position. You know, I was looking through last night at some emails from jobs I had applied for, and you know, it was a long journey. I had my doubts that I would make it in this field. I wasn't quite sure where my place was, especially, you know, running a small company. You're used to being head honcho, but those skills are not always applicable to that next level up. So, you know, I decided to start my own shop with a business partner.
Wow.
That has morphed into Stratagem, which we founded in January 2018. And, you know, I feel like we have one of the strongest rosters in the country, singers singing everywhere here domestically, around the world. You know, as well as being incredibly talented individuals, they're some of the best people in the industry, which I'm really proud of. And I think that's just such an important part of what we do. You know, if you're going to spend a month, 2 months in a young artist program, 9 months to a year with the same group of people, they just have to be decent, kind human beings. And I think I was asked in an interview a couple weeks ago, what defines a Stratagem artist? And of course, they're all incredibly talented, but they're people who I want to spend time with. They're people who I feel excited to get a text or a phone call from, not dread it. And, you know, there's a level of trust there that just needs to be there. And I feel I've really found my place in the industry to synthesize my skill set to best service what is an incredible art form, to do the casting and suggestions to companies, to think of long-term trajectory for repertoire, to form these long relationships that I never could have at a company, because you hope that a singer advances from that level of organization to, you know, hopefully working with these folks their entire careers. And that, you know, the reason I go to work every day, or, you know, come to my computer 10 my bedroom at this point.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's been quite a journey. I'm so glad that I've worn the hats that I wore. You know, while I was at my opera company, we had an issue with a director, and I ended up co-directing a Traviata with a week's notice. That definitely, you know, I thought about being a stage director for a minute, realized it wasn't for me.
Yeah.
But I think, you know, now talking to directors, talking to artistic administrators, talking to singers especially, and just knowing what they're going through, being able to sympathize and empathize with what they do, to what it's like doing an audition sick, to what it's like to prepare a role. And then on the administrative side, just to know the ins and outs of producing a show. I think that has been instrumental in my development as a manager, and I want to continue learning.
No, that's amazing. You mentioned, you know, like I've talked here and in the series, and last week we had Tony Manoli, one of my very, very dear friends, here, and we were talking about, you know, building your team when you're a singer, right? And a lot of our followers here, especially for this show, are singers, or they are thinking about it, or they're training at different levels to become one. So I've been talking about like that selection of the agent, right? And how difficult it can be, because as you said, you can be working with that person for the rest of their career. You're gonna help them come into the business, sustain them, grow them, and then, you know, hopefully keep them at a certain level for a long year, and then help them to go into a very exciting replanning or exit, if you want to say, right? Mm-hmm. So it's a very big investment. And you said, you know, I want to be with people that I'm excited to talk to. So what is what you're looking into an artist? You know, like you have a very specific roster. I can see a little bit the strategy behind the way that you're building, but tell us a little bit, what are you looking into those artists that you say, well, at the end of the day, I have to like you as a person first?
Yeah, I mean, that's incredibly important, I think, before we even start considering a singer's talent, because there is an incredible glut of talent out there. Anyone could build a roster of 50, 100, 200 incredibly talented singers because they're out there. So I think for me, before we even start considering the talent, we talk with our team about what do we need for the roster, what sorts of FOC, what sorts of repertoire, what sort of level we're looking for. I think roster construction is incredibly important for managers to consider, as I think there are certain rosters out there that talent collect. They take a talented singer, and then there really isn't a long-term plan for them moving forward. And I think if if we're putting singers competing against each other in a very similar flock with a very similar weight and vocal color, that is a disservice to our clients. You know, we really want to diversify, and, you know, of course there's repertoire crossover within soprano to mezzo, or, you know, baritone to bass baritone. But I really want each person on our roster to have a very specific place for us. So, you know, number one, roster construction is really important to whom we're considering even having the first conversations about bringing on. The second thing we do is we call administrators, teachers, colleagues, especially folks on our roster.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to work with this person again? Are they a good colleague? What can you tell me about their process in rehearsal? What can you tell me about, you know, how they are both as a human being and a professional singer? And I think once those things check out, then we can start talking about how does this person fit on the roster vocally? How do we build a career trajectory for them? And, you know, we have singers who we court for 3 or 4 years, perhaps that are younger and aren't quite ready for management, that we, you know, help strategize with. We don't do any sort of trial period for auditioners or clients. In that way, I feel if I'm giving auditions to someone not on my roster over someone on my roster, that's not fair. And I also think singers get stuck in that trial period in a sort of endless limbo that I think is unfortunate as well. But we do, you know, there are singers who we advise on repertoire, on which companies to sing for. And then, you know, working towards what they do for us and what we can do for them. Talking about if we're the right fit as an agency. Stratagem is not the right fit for everybody. And I don't think any manager should be the right fit for anybody. We are incredibly hands-on. We are talking to our roster, especially during COVID. We have weekly check-ins with the entire roster, plus we've done 2 individual check-ins. And, you know, I'm texting, calling, emailing my singers almost consistently. And I think that level of human contact is incredibly important, especially at a time like this. But really talking about what we can do to help capitalize on the contacts a singer already has. Every singer comes with a dowry of contacts. We're not really taking anyone straight out of grad school who hasn't worked at the professional level. And how we can leverage that with the contacts that we have at Stratagem to create that sustainable career path, to create a career that the singer is happy with. And I think one thing that we've really had to pull to a wider lens during COVID, you know, I have singers on my roster who asked for 7 or 8 roles to learn day one. They were, you know, nose to the grindstone, practicing every day, you know, really ready to jump in and continue advancing that part of their career. And I have singers on my roster who have not opened their mouths since this started. And I totally understand that. Like, this is an incredibly tough time with a very undetermined timeline at the end. You know, a colleague of mine said, there's no light at the end of the tunnel yet. And it's true. Like, it really, it's tough. But for folks to say there's nothing to do, I think is definitely not true. We have some exciting stuff coming up at Stratagem that I'm confident would not have had the mental space to really grow without COVID. So we're really trying to be as proactive as possible and to continue servicing our artists on a really personal basis. You know, that is sort of how we find our clients. You know, we're at young artist programs, we're at performances, we go to schools, we do master classes. And then when we hear a singer for the roster, we do at least an hour of singing, so we know that the singer is on the same page with us about repertoire, can respond positively to feedback. We're just on the same page, and then we go have a beer afterwards, talk career trajectory, and see if there's a match. You know, it really is. I remember when I first started at IMG, one of the agents there said, finding a manager is like dating. And it really is. It's an incredibly personal, honest relationship that has ups and downs, that has the singer in an incredibly vulnerable place to have a trust in their career and to know that their team is putting them forward for the right things. And sometimes tough discussions have to happen. And I think without that trust, those can get very testy very quickly. So I'm really glad that we, as a team, have established that trust right away with our folks. And, you know, I feel comfortable telling them anything and everything at any time.
So let me like stop you here, and because I got like 3-4 questions just from while you were saying a lot of these things, you know, like you said like roster, you know, kind of formation, you know, like you're building specific parts of the roster, because it's something that singers hear a lot. For the ones that are just joining in, you know, like I'm talking here with Justin Werner, incredible agent, president of Stratagem Artist, and and you mentioned that you don't sign everybody, right? Like you want a very specific formation on that, and and you know, there's so many ways to go at this as an agent, right? Like, or an agency. One of my very incredible mentors, Mike Ovitz, he was president of Creative Arts Agency and founder of that. And he would talk a lot about like having all the conflicts. He wanted to have all the directors, all the stars, all the writers, and package it and move it like that. But that was for the film industry. You found for you a more successful, a specific niche, like, you know, I'm just gonna have like my 3, 4, 5 sopranos and my 5, 6 basses and my 4 different tenors, and I'm just gonna push one. And we see other agencies that you see, you know, like I personally, when I was in Columbia Artist, when I was at the top of kind of like my prime in that type of career, in my length, you know, what that I have, people like in the same manager, you know, we were with Matthew Epstein and Bill Gary at the time. It was Dimitri Pitas, Michael Fabiano, Rene Barbera, and myself, and the 4 of us, we shared a lot of the same repertoire. A lot of us, we had our specifics, but you know, so they benefited in a way, you know, like when I was not free, Barbera, Fabiano was also free, and then vice versa, right? But you mentioned that you have a specific formation. So how does that work for you? You know, like, because clearly you know, you have been successful about it. What is the main difference for you where you're like, okay, I want to give this person something, or like, why not have all the conflicts? Let's say, what is your argument to that?
So yeah, I think there are pluses and minuses to the major corporate model,
Mm-hmm.
and Columbia and IMG and Opus 3 have a more global reach than we do at this point. You know, especially for IMG to have offices in multiple countries, to have representation in every market, they can handle a wider range of singers because
Okay.
there are just more opportunities at their fingertips. We have really consciously concentrated Stratagem domestically because I really want to corner this market before I overstretch to Europe. Now, if
Okay.
European opportunities come up, we're all about them. If musical theater opportunities come up, we're all about them. But when a singer comes to us, we really are honest and say we're concentrating on North American opportunities. If other opportunities come across our desk, that's great, but that's not where the majority of our energy is going. So I
Okay.
think having that conversation with someone is really
That's
important. For
good.
someone who wants to concentrate in Europe, we're not the right fit. But we
We're
do have a clause in our contract where we are more than willing to share with the European agent as long as we have a
mhm.
conversation with them about not double booking and their career
Yeah, yeah.
trajectory. Um, so I want each of my artists to feel like they have a specific place on the roster. I feel like that trust, that Stratagem is going to propel them in that career trajectory is incredibly important. Now, in every FOC, there's going to be multiple singers singing each role.
Mm-hmm.
The role I use for this example usually is Despina. Like you can have, you know, a blonda style lighter soprano sing it. You can have a slightly older, larger lyric voice
Mm-hmm.
sing it, and you can have a lyric mezzo sing it. All legitimately, all with the vocal
Yeah,
requirements that they entail.
indeed.
And I'm more than happy to send one of each of those to an audition if it's appropriate for the company size, if it's folks that a company knows. But to send 2 of the same, very similar FOC, it just creates bitterness and competition and negative energy that I really want to stay away from.
Okay.
And we are very transparent with our singers about who's being put up for what who's at what audition. You know, Stratagem's attended every audition in New York City for our main stage artists the last 2 seasons. And I think, you know, having an idea of what a singer does on their best day and their worst day and who they're around is incredibly important.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But
So what happens when you find, you know, let's say you have an incredible tenor, and then you find another one, like you put above, and I'm just curious, I'm not criticizing, I'm just curious, like you say, well, you know, do you have the conversation with your existing client and say like, hey, listen, you know, I'm maybe gonna bring the competition a little bit, but I'm in your corner. It's just, you know, this person came, or you say, you know what, I'm just gonna choose one. Like, how does that happen? I'm fascinated about it. Like, bear with me.
I mean, I really want to have a conversation with the artists who I already have to
Mm-hmm.
make sure there are roles, company level styles of opera that they are specialized in, that they're going to be first on our list. If a client is not first on the list for something, somewhere at some level of company, I'm not servicing them correctly. And I think, especially with your tenor example, there are so many different kinds of tenors and
Yeah.
so many, for a role like Almaviva and Barber, there are 3, 4 different kinds of tenors who can sing that legitimately. The super high flyer, the person who's not going to add any high notes, who has a little bit more meat in the middle. So, like, I do feel like there's flexibility within vocal color,
Okay.
within look, within, um, if a sound is super Italianate or has that steel for German repertoire. And these are all conversations we have with both our new clients coming onto the roster and the folks who we already have. Because, every 3, 6 months we have a formal check-in. Like, how is your voice feeling? Is it moving into larger repertoire? Do you feel like you're ready to push a house size up? Is the work that you're getting, leading you to different repertoire with your teacher, your coach? I always say, as a manager, I only am part of the toolbox. I'm another
Mm-hmm.
weapon for a singer to use. I don't replace their teacher. I don't replace their coach. I don't have a vocal ped degree, nor do
Yeah.
I really want one, to be honest with you. And as a former singer, I know enough about diction and style where if something's egregious, I'll hear it and we'll say something. But when it gets to the nitty-gritty technical stuff, I'm not the right person to ask. I will tell that singer, like, take this to your teacher. Let them know what we think. If they are not hearing the same thing, happy to have a discussion. And
Great.
especially in New York, I have a really good relationship with a lot of the top voice teachers because their singers came to Opera Exchange. Because I was really helping these singers get big roles. And when you're in your mid-20s, late 20s, your teacher is someone you lean on to coach it up, to make sure you're vocally ready.
Mm-hmm.
So it's interesting because during COVID, I've said, we're not looking for new singers, but we're never arrogant enough not to listen. And I think if we have an artist who comes, who is the next coming, who's
Yeah.
just that incredible, I'm happy to have a conversation.
Right? You're
But
like,
I do,
yeah.
have a responsibility for the folks who have trusted us since our inception. And I think just having a really transparent dialogue about that
Yeah.
creates a community atmosphere that I think is quite unique to our roster.
Justin, like what I have since the first time I took a phone call from you, like from your previous even firm, with Coretta and Werner, right?
Mm-hmm.
I remember that you always have these kind of business lingo, like you have mentioned, we're gonna corner the market, we're gonna respect our for structure of the of our clients that we're gonna represent. You want a very like hands-on, client relationship. You use a lot of concepts of the business world, like uh, do you find the business of management as open and as profit oriented, let's say, or do you feel it still is that the general industry is still about the hocus pocus of finding a singer and putting it out there? Do you feel that now we are switching into a more like let's try to become this a more obvious business, like especially with COVID, I think that everybody's starting to find that we don't have structures of revenue as clear besides performing,
Mm-hmm.
so you always have that business. That's why when we were on the phone, like it was like, let's make it happen, let's have a date here, because we normally in creative conversations like to talk about the bare part of the industry, the business aspect, that where can we go, what, like, kind of debunking a lot of these myths. That's why I ask you, because everybody here and there the line like, I don't have a space in my roster. Now we kind of wait and into your mind and see a solution for that or an answer to that. So you have this profit, but I feel sometimes in the industry that we talk a lot about, the facts and the system and the apoggio and the diction, but how we don't like teach about all these things that you say, corner the market, presenting, enhancing your list of already relationships, all these things. How do you see the shift, or what is the state of management? Are we ready to go into business oriented for profit type of talk about it, or do you still feel that we are in the museum era?
So I think there's a mix. I think
Okay.
for me, the most fulfilling conversations that I have with fellow managers, with singers, with artistic administrators,
Mhm.
are folks who love this industry and are folks who wanted to move forward, of course, in a more financially solvent than it is now, but
Mhm.
who love the art, who want to go hear good singing, who want to create a sustainable ecosystem for everyone. And I think that has to be the core of it, even if we do move to a more business oriented model. You know, when I talk to a new singer, for us at Stratagem, we've been very lucky. We can be picky now because we have a very high level of talent. And for us, if you are not singing at an A house level, you have to have the potential to sing at an A house level. And not that the entire career has to be at four houses, but
Mhm.
that ceiling has to be there for us to feel encouraged to develop that talent, and to, you know, create a profit because we all need to put food on the table.
Yeah.
So I think the hocus pocus sort of, you know, one guru about repertoire era is over. I think there are a lot more educated minds out there, especially with sort of our generation of administrator, you know, the Josh Wintergraves, the Paul Hoppers, folks like that, who, you know, had much more successful singing careers than myself, who have been in those rehearsal rooms, have been also on the other side casting for every level from young artists to, you know, Met contracts. And who at their core, even though we're trying to create a profitable model,
Mhm.
want to put the art form first. And even in instances where we can't put the art form first and we have to think of the bottom line, that passion and love still needs to be there. I think it's incredibly important that we don't lose that aspect of it. You know, I often, when I talk to undergrad, graduate students, you know, if you don't love this business, for me as a manager, if I don't love singers and love talking shop and love, you know, the ups and downs of the emotional roller coaster, I don't make enough money in this business to be miserable. And, you know, of course there has to be a financial payout for it because it's a job,
Mhm.
but, you know, I could go make a lot more money in a cubicle somewhere, but I get to watch my singers play dress up for a living. It's, I'm incredibly honored to work with the singers that I work with. I mean, they're family to me. So, you know, I do feel like there's a mix of, am I putting an artist forward who's going to advance the art form, but am I also putting an artist forward who can make us both money? And I think in the conversations that we have about adding people to the roster, in the conversations we have about with our clients we already have, profitability is constantly part of it. But we
Yeah.
want it to be within the artistic integrity of the voice itself, and we're never going to bastardize the voice to make more money. Like it
Okay.
has to be an incredibly natural, pragmatic progression. I also think for us, we really value singers who have other interests. You know, for someone like Jenny Moser, who we signed actually right at the top of COVID,
Mhm.
enterprises like Jenny Moser Design, like Stage Time, I think really enrich the singing experience and
Definitely.
give her a network of contacts that no other singer her age has,
Yeah.
rather than, oh, she's doing something else, she might not be taking this seriously, which is unfortunately an opinion in the industry I hear a lot. So, you know,
Yeah.
we really try to foster other passions. I mean, when I was 26, I was interning at IMG, running an opera company in grad school, and then thinking about transitioning to management. Like, if I could juggle that, I think anyone can. And, you know, really any experience that someone gets in the industry, no matter how many pivots there are, only help the experience. You know, I think every singer who's out there should sit in an auditions for a day, see what's successful, see what's not, like see what nerves look like from the other side, and also that we in the casting part of it aren't looking for people to fail. We want to find the folks who fill those holes.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, I think in general it's just being pragmatic about it, and you know, not every singer I sign, it's a combination of my brain and my heart,
Mhm.
but the heart has to come first.
Okay. No, I very respectable, and I get it. I get it. I respect that very much. Justin, because you and I are very rare breeds in this industry. We are the minority administrators and managers, you know, like in a field where there is very few. Like I don't have a very vast network of Latin American Hispanic opera administrators that work in the United States, right? And I feel that, you know, I don't know a lot about of like of Asian, you know, descendant heritage managers, so that work and do the work that you do in the field and in the region that you do. How difficult or how specific has been to be, you know, kind of like pioneering a certain ethnic entrance into the business. I do feel it, you know, in my end, being the very first Hispanic to arrive to a level one company and now going to a top three like Munich, like it's a very, very like no one is there to bounce ideas of like, what did you do this time, you know,
Hmm.
because it's just the way it is, you know, everybody else maybe have role models that have the same path, have the same context. In my way, I feel that sometimes I'm like, okay, well, I guess this is it, you know, I'm gonna just do the leap of faith. So how has been that, like, is it a detriment? Do you find blocks? Do you have find like, you know, there's no problem? Like, how has been your experience in the industry in that sense?
So I think it's been really interesting because when I first started, you know, I founded Cret and Werner when I was 26, and I thought how I looked, my age, my lack of experience would be a huge detriment. We would never get
Mhm.
singers to trust us. We would never, you know, be successful. And all those things have proved to be a giant advantage in the field. I think,
Boom.
um, you know, to be technologically savvy as a younger person, to understand social media and its importance, and I'm not saying my older colleagues don't do this, but I'm saying I think I'm still a millennial. As a millennial, these things are ingrained into my head and were throughout my schooling, throughout my time, you know, career steps wise. Um, I think for me, I've had my share of biased folks because of how I looked. You know, I remember my first audition I ever had with a singer. I walked in and the pianist stood up and said, "Oh, thank God I get a break." And I was like, "I actually failed college piano twice, so you don't want me behind that bench." I just, you know, um,
Oh, wow.
yeah, and you know, it's unfortunate, but I think, you know, I feel it's important to increase the pipeline. It's important to let those things bounce off because they're biases that are really unfortunately there. Um, and I think, you know, I had a Met stage director tell me I couldn't express when I was singing because Asians don't have wrinkles on their face, and Asians have trouble showing their emotions. And
Ah,
you know, I was in an audition and like, "Oh, why is your English so good?" And I was like, "Because I grew up in New York City." You know, and like
oh,
there is this really terrible bias against Asian American singers that it's this robotic, you know, passionless art form. And honestly, some of the most passionate people that I know are Asian American. Um, I think too, you know, we have Asian clients on my roster who, when we talked about joining forces, I understood their experiences because I lived them, you know. Um, and to make sure those artists aren't pigeonholed within ethnically specific repertoire. Like that's incredibly important because I'm not going to just cast the Asian shows, quote unquote. Like I want to be known for my work and not how I look. And I think it's interesting for me um, as an adopted individual from South Korea into a family with Irish parents. You know, I don't have a traditionally Asian last name. And when I would meet people for the first time, they're like, "Oh, you're Justin Werner." You know, it's I don't get it really anymore because I feel like we're a pretty known entity within the business. But I was taught to just let those things bounce off. I was raised right. Um, and I think those experiences definitely inform how I am as a human more than a manager, but also as a manager, to empathize with my colleagues of color. Um, but, you know, if someone isn't going to cast my singers because of how I look, if someone isn't going to cast one of my singers because of how they look, there's better work that we can be doing.
right.
And, you know,
Amen.
I don't feel like a pioneer. It is interesting to me. You know, right now there are really only three managers of color, and that's incredibly unfortunate.
Industry, listen, please. Like, this is really, really dramatic. How many, Justin?
To
Again?
my knowledge, there's three. And,
Wow.
we
Wow.
need to increase the pipeline. Like, I am currently, mentoring a young tenor, a black tenor who is transitioning to the other side of the table. And bravo to Glimmerglass, because people like Alan and Amara have switched his trajectory to either arts administration or artist management, which is incredible. But
Wow.
this individual, who is incredibly sharp, really smart, knows his rep, was told by a couple of my colleagues that he didn't have vision, that it wasn't the right fit. And that's how we don't have a pipeline. That is how we continue opera the way it has been for the last X amount of years, and how our minority colleagues don't have representation. And I think that's wrong. I think with the amount of amazing Latinx, Asian, Black singers we have, the fact that the needle is so skewed is ridiculous. And if I can play a little part in that, that's great, but I don't want to ever be defined by how I look. And nor do I think anyone does. It's a frustrating topic for sure, but I think the only way we increase the pipeline is to show by our actions that it can be successful. For folks for me, like Al Fletcher, Army Archuleta, to show that boutique is successful. Boutique and strategy can be successful. Strategy will never happen without that. Opening the pipeline. So it happens in every sort of segment of the industry. And I'm happy to be part of a generation of administrators that I think will start to change that.
Well, Justin, I am losing you a tiny bit in your connection. You froze a little bit on my side. Can you hear me?
That.
Oop.
Yeah, I can hear you.
There you are. There you're back. There you are. I'm impressed how, this cipher you said of three only diversity managers, because that changes a little bit the management, the pipeline. Like, how do you observe the pipeline? Once I've seen it, like when I am there and I have sang a lot in the panels, and I have been, I recently did several master classes for the Mexican Opera Studio and for the Festival of Morelia in Mexico, and they ask you about, like, how do I go and I become an opera star in the US, right? And it's hard because not everybody's looking at it. They're not looking at different markets. They're looking from what they are familiar, right? And so having managers that are also aware where those pipelines of diversity happen. We have to inundate diversity, not only in our stage, but like the people that are feeding, that are scouting, that are nurturing talent. They also have to be also in a diversity ideal world where we're just finding the greatest voices independently, who they manage, who are they managed by, where did they go to school, and which is the color of the passport. Justin, you have a considerably very young roster, right? You mostly have a very young artist, full of energy and anything. Like, do you feel that in your case it's better to manage artists that are kind of on near your age range? How do you feel in that sense? Is it something that you're searching kind of on purpose, or it just kind of happened? But one of the things that I search is you have a significantly very powerful young upcoming roster, but tell me, how does that working for you?
So I think the age thing has changed definitely from CNW to Stratagem. We have a more established clientele who's interested in us. Our median age has gone from when we started mid-20s to now mid-30s, and that's developing some of the singers we signed years ago. That is getting a more established level of talent interested in signing with us. It's interesting because I call my roster my kids all the time, but they're mostly older than me. I represent my undergrad voice teacher now, which is, if you can't find a better circle of life moment than that, it's a lot of fun. And I think for me, not that I needed the validation, but for someone who I really trusted in formative years to now trust us is incredible. Um, I think to me, age really doesn't matter. I just want singers who are marketable and have long career trajectory. I was talking to Alex Fletcher a couple days ago, who is incredible. And we were talking about developing singers while they're on our roster versus sort of jumping on a bandwagon, because anyone could do that. I really want to be
Of
hands-on
course.
and developing that talent from the ground up. So, it's interesting because I think we are younger compared to my colleagues, but we only have 3 singers in their 20s now. So it is, so many of our singers who we developed through the app ranks are now established tier 1 and 2 professionals. But we did that. We helped with that. And I think that's the most satisfying part. I think, too, it is important to have singers of my age who have lived through certain life experiences that I have. To be very honest, the big reason why I quit singing, besides being less talented than my colleagues, was to settle down, get married, not be living out of a suitcase. And I have, especially during COVID, to spend this much time with my wife. It's the most time we've ever spent together in a row. And that's incredibly valuable. But to understand what it is when my singers are starting to have kids and how that's going to affect their career. How marriage, how moving from out of New York and being in another city to fly in for auditions. Like I sympathize and empathize with those things. And I'm just going to continue growing with more life experience, and I hope that informs how I treat my singers moving forward.
Wow, that's pretty powerful. Justin, how is the state today of management and your singers? How are you keeping them in the game? Like as you said at the beginning that you have singers that haven't touched their scores, they haven't sang a note, and you're okay with that. There are others that are overachieving and they are already learning, 7, 8 roles. And you also, you wake up to cancellations, to postponements, to settlement arrangement negotiations, relief payments, you call it. Um, how are you managing this crisis from your company eyes, and as the agent and source of the new, like the person that is in between the abyss of the industry and the client, right? Like you're right there seeing the moves, and you have to manage the psychology of your singer, the mental state of them, to keep them in the game, and at the same time tell them the truth. Like how is it going? What are your thoughts about it?
I think, first of all, I'm incredibly proud of how my roster has reacted to this crisis. They've come together
Okay.
like nothing before. They are some of the most resilient individuals that I know. And sometimes that sounds like window dressing, but just seeing them in meetings, seeing the communication that's happening, I believe that transparency is the most important part of the manager-singer relationship. So we have been really open with our efforts, really open with what's happening in the industry. I think there's a difference between rumor and fact, and we try not to spread things that are just like in the wind. But I think that communication with the singer, both on an individual level and in our weekly roster check-ins, is incredibly important to what proactive steps can be done. Is it a good time to get your headshots if I can do it socially distanced? Is it a good time to review my website? Can I get recordings with track done? How is the audition season going to look like? So, I think that there are efforts of communication that have been incredibly essential for us moving forward. The North American Managers Coalition has been meeting since week 1 of COVID to try to equalize risk for both companies and artists. And getting to know my managerial colleagues through that forum has been incredibly valuable for me, to know their philosophies, to get to know how they cast and, what their roster construction looks like. And it's been really important for me to line up moral compasses with the folks that I trust and that are treating their artists in the right way. So, we know who our high touch clients are. We know who our clients are that are fine to be left alone for a little while. we really
Mm-hmm.
take our cue off of them. If our singers want to meet every week with us, great. If they want to meet once a year, great. Like, every singer has a different tolerance and need for
Yeah.
latest information. Um,
Right.
and each of our individual singers, just has those individual needs. So we really try to take the cue off our artists, but give the forum to be in the current, no. But
Yeah.
those roster meetings aren't required. The individual check-ins aren't required. Everyone's taken one. But, it is just there as an hour a week to try to forget that we're in COVID and to figure out ways to be proactive in this crisis, whether it be digital opportunities, whether it be talking to our colleagues about collaboration opportunities, whether it's, being proactive and starting a company during this time. We just want to be a resource for our singers.
Wow. Oof. Justin, I think I lost you again for a minute. Just for, oof. Sorry, guys. We're having a little bit of connection. There you are. Better? Yes. Here you are. Justin, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Perfect. Justin, you touched on something very important, like there is a movement now for a lot of our followers that don't know that a lot of North American managers are now talking constantly, and you guys are kind of forming a task force, and you guys are communicating little by little as one, with companies, with AGMA, with the unions, with a lot of membership. Like, how, what is the main things that you guys want, like, if I may ask, like, what is one of the things that it's in your minds right away? I know that you guys have got together because of COVID, right? But what is the one of the things that you guys would like to fix, let's say?
I mean, I don't want to go into specifics as things haven't been released yet, and those conversations
Okay.
with companies are very individualized. But for us, it's really
Mm-hmm.
to make a more equitable environment for artists and companies alike. I think that no one wants
Okay.
all the risk to be on one side, and to not prevent, but to better prepare for another crisis of this magnitude. I think it's really important for all of us to be proactive, to be communicating with each other, to have a more united front when something happens. And for me, the communication between large agencies and boutiques, different individuals, you see each other in the hall and questions and say hello. The conversations that are happening are incredibly unique. For me, I'm part of a new EDI committee that I think is incredibly important to continue the pipeline moving forward. Yeah, I think it's just to spread the around and to better protect our artists.
Okay. Okay. It's gonna be.
There you go.
You're back? Yeah.
Yes.
No, that's very interesting. That's very interesting. I think that there's so many conversations that we need to have more in the open, about how we pay, how we collaborate. I really would like to get, in these few minutes that we have left, like, what are your thinkings as a manager perspective with all the traffic of digital content that exists today? Like, what is your worries or your hopes, or how do you see the industry right now with all the digital offerings that are happening?
Yeah, I hope that the industry keeps communicating in a really proactive way. I just hope these conversations continue post-COVID. I mean, for us as an individual company, we are going to continue our weekly meetings past COVID, just as an opportunity for artists to share ideas and to get caught up on the news of the day. I think as an industry, on the manager side, I just want these communications to continue happening so we can be proactive in advancing and protecting our artists. And I think for a company and art form level, these digital offerings can be a huge way to share content, able to share individual singers. Last Monday, Wolf Trap had live auditions, which was incredible to hear live performance in the first time for 5 months. And because it was digital, we had a much larger group of agents, company managers, artistic directors, artistic administrators than we ever would have had if it was a live audition at Wolf Trap. None of us had to travel. It was incredibly convenient. And, I had 2 singers in that group who are now much better exposed to those artistic administrators. So my hope is to just continue increasing visibility for the art form, to continue bringing in new audience, and within our art form to increase the pipeline, not to replace any sort of meritocracy, but to just give people an even playing field, so we can better showcase all the talent we have, especially in this country.
Wow. Like I hope that one of the things that we all taken advantage, and I will say it again with all the people that join us today, are part of your own fan club too, that I think that we need to educate ourselves a lot about what is our real market value, start thinking, all of us, from managers, singers, and impresarios, to depend a little less from the giving part of the revenue, and also understanding what is our part in the real market. Like I keep seeing figures of now from the TDO network of how much Facebook pays you for a video view, or how much Pandora and YouTube, like you have to have that amount of traffic to generate any income, and then I pair it with like what I know that are the media payouts that exist in AGMA houses or AFM houses today. And it just blows my mind, like that there's no comparison of what today, like let's say 1 million of Pandora plays are gonna only pay you about $1,000. Like you have to be streamed 1 million times in Pandora in order to get that amount of money for you. So, and then of course that goes to the label and to your management and a little bit to X, Y, and Z, and you maybe receive 10% of that. Right. So, but we need those media to that media material to promote, to be invading the frame of our phones, of our computers. So I think that we're going to need to educate a lot ourselves on that matter. And I hope that, also from the manager aspect, that it comes with that in the table, not just about when we come in to negotiate. I'm all about, like, we pay all our content creators at TDO Network. But also we trying to pay, like market value, right? Of what we're making it there. So I hope we can connect with managers in that sense too. Justin, we have a few minutes before I say goodbye to the audience. We normally let them go early, like in church. And last thoughts about where the industry, what are your hopes now when we come back from COVID? What would you like to see? We have so much change in economics. We are now, I feel that there's a movement of very, very big action plan towards diversity, towards new technologies, right? What are your hopes coming back from COVID?
I hope that we continue, as I said, the communication that's happening during COVID, when we don't have to be having the communication. I hope we all take time out of our days to communicate with an artistic administrator, a fellow manager, a singer that we usually wouldn't have the chance to. I also think it's an amazing opportunity for New Opera to continue to showcase stories that are applicable to our country, applicable to the citizens who live here, and applicable to our audience. It's been really incredible to see some of the digital offerings that have come out, some of the singers that I've been exposed to that I wouldn't have usually been exposed to. And, of course we need to be flexible and lingual in all of the foreign languages in which opera has been based for years. But to see some of the great American opera that's been produced in the last 10 years is incredibly inspiring. And I think for my singers who are native English speakers, it is that level of intimacy with the text that is incredibly important. That's why I want to hear an Italian sing Italian. And also that stories are being written that are incredibly close to our hearts, that are incredibly important on topics of social justice, on topics of diversity. So I just hope that we continue to give chances to everyone, not in any sort of bias towards people of color or folks with disabilities, but that they are given an even chance to showcase their stories, and that singers are willing to continue lending their talents to that interpretation.
Boom. Justin, thank you so much for being with us today. You have bring a lot of insight into what the world of opera is, and the backstage deals and the management questions that we have for a lot of our singers. And I'm very thankful that you came in here on the, on Saturday, the middle of your day. For everybody to listen to us, this was Creative Conversations with David Lomeli, and today with our friend Justin Werner from Stratagem Artist. We see you next week. It's going to be my final episode before I go into a little vacation time of the web. We're going to have a session about how to become an artistic administrator, where I'm going to have a special guest that it's right now in that path of deciding where to, like you have your moment, Justin, of like, I want to go into management. I have now one going into artistic administrator, and we're going to talk a little bit about how to go into that. We're also going to have a guest. I'm super excited about this. We have a guest MC it for the show for 4 weeks after I leave. She comes in August 8th, the one and incredible only soprano superstar, Karen Slack, comes to guest host our show for 4 weeks. So tune in next week. We're talking about artistic administrators, how to go into that administration part if you are thinking about it. And then August 8th, Miss Karen Slack joins the TDO network for 4 weeks with us. And this was David Lomeli, Creative Conversations for the TDO network. Thank you, guys. See you next Saturday. Thank you, Justin, again.
Thanks, David.
Ciao, ciao.